This is CheloniaCast, episode 45. Today we're joined by Charlie Moorcroft, who is the founder of the Moorcroft Conservation Foundation. Charlie's doing some great work with a variety of species. He works with a lot of turtles and tortoises, and we're really excited to talk to him today. Thanks for coming on, Charlie.
Thanks for having me. I've looked at your past lineup and it's pretty intense. So hopefully, I feel honored to be here, and thanks for having me. And hopefully we can, get something interesting out there.
Yeah, it's exciting because it's sort of a different line. We haven't talked to as many people working with turtles, so this will be really exciting. Wyatt, you want to get us started?
Yeah, so we usually start off the episode by asking everybody the same question. What is the pivotal moment in your life that got you interested in turtles and tortoises?
Who goes first? The guest?
You. We're interviewing you. So
clearly I'd be last. Feel like the old guy. I guess the pivotal moment for me was as a kid. Family vacations. I come from a large family. We would take time in the summer or different parts of the year, and it would always involve lakes or streams or water, rarely the ocean, even though I lived close to it as a kid. Family would go fishing, swimming. I was more interested in wildlife, and turtles were something I just always looked for and enjoyed studying, watching them, sneaking up on them. I didn't really catch them or bother them, but they were probably the highlight of the trip for me.
It's interesting. That's how a lot of people, I mean, in a lot of different capacities, working with turtles have started, is that experience in nature as a kid, and then that kind of builds over time. I'm sort of curious initially. We'd like to. It's interesting to get different people's perspective on this, but now you work in a conservation capacity, sort of a lot of the time, and I'm curious why, sort of holistically for all animals, but turtles in particular, people should care.
That's a really broad question, and it's a good question, and I'm not sure I can answer that. I can just speak mostly for me. So I guess I think of myself as a keeper, really, as a private keeper, and then as someone involved in preservation, probably more than conservation, although conservation's hugely important. I don't get to be that involved with it other than funding some initiatives that, can do better things than I can. But I think, we all have to take a look at what's important to us and what's of value and what's happening with the world and the planet. And hopefully, remind us of what makes us compassionate and, get outside and do stuff with nature and remember the wildlife doesn't really have a chance unless we're careful about it.
Right, that's well said. I'm curious too. You brought this up, and this seems to be something that circulates a lot, especially on the sort of captive side of turtle work and turtle conservation. Is the semantics behind it, the distinction between preservation and conservation. Curious if you could speak to that a bit. There's sort of a nuance there, but curious to hear what your perspective is on that difference.
Well, I talk a lot, so fasten your seatbelts. I started out just as a keeper, and I did a lot of research, and I wanted to be very thorough, and I was finally at a point where I was living full-time, long-term enough in an area with a great climate that I was able to add some a different collection of animals. So I started with cherry heads after a lot of research, and then slowly added on other things. And then in the process of really studying how to do it well, I went to different organizations and actually learned myself the difference between conservation and preservation, and really was able to identify that I'm preserving some rare, which is a weird word, endangered, on different level, species of animals, which are exciting, but I'm not conserving them in the wilds. By having a group of, say, Egyptian tortoises in revamped garage in South Florida, I'm not conserving anything in the wild. And, are we preserving animals in captivity? Yes. Do I breed them? Yes. Do I make myself feel good and maybe lie to myself to a degree that I'm making a big difference in the world? I try to, I'd like to, but I don't really know what is working. You've been to Madagascar. You've actually had boots on the ground and seen what real conservation is. I have a couple of radiateds. That's nothing compared to what you've been able to do. Although maybe at some point there'll be more radiateds in preservation groups and captive groups and insurance colonies than there will be in the wild. And so I think it's a complicated question, and I'm not sure I made it more complicated or gave any answers.
I mean, it is interesting that a lot of people keep animals because they have an obsession with collecting, and that's sort of what it is. But people like yourself, it's along the lines of doing something that's beneficial for the species, and it's not driven by something that's probably an unhealthy obsession. So I think that it does fall under that umbrella of conservation, even if you're not necessarily doing something in the wild. It's not necessarily doing anything about the driver of the decline of a species, but it is preserving. So I think that is a good distinction. The semantics behind it is interesting. Maybe we can sort of transition. I think that provides a decent baseline for the philosophy behind sort of what you're doing. But the Moorcroft Conservation Foundation has a kind of wide-ranging, I guess it's sort of multifaceted goal. Maybe you can explain sort of the mission statement and sort of what the goal of MCF is and the work you're doing.
All right, Lon, this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy one, but it's actually, I think it's interesting. Hopefully at least one other person will. My main job, my career is I'm an equestrian, whether it's riding or training animals or teaching children, adults, people to ride and show. That's my main career. I was involved in some great projects and different foundations and different committees in the governance of our sport. And slowly that kind of changed and evolved into me taking a little bit of a break and stepping away. And also at the same point being really immersed and living in South Florida for many years. And it just was a natural kind of morph into wanting to give back, wanting to raise money and raise awareness and help educate and just kind of get the story out there. I was involved in some other foundations and amazing opportunities like that. So we just decided, a small group of us decided to start a conservation foundation. And Anthony Pierleone was involved in the conversation initially, and some really close friends. And the point was to raise enough money. I'm surrounded, luckily, by a lot of wealth. I'm lucky enough to do this at the highest level, and I live in a town that is one of the most populated horse, communities. And there was an opportunity there to kind of broaden that out. And I actually spoke with the sports psychologist about the direction was going in life, and she basically said, there's so many other interesting levels to what you're doing, and you kind of spare people from it. Don't. So that was a good moment to just get what I was doing out there and talk about my collection and not, show up at work and pretend I didn't have anything else in my world. So anyway, we started a foundation. We've raised a lot of money. I do have a really cool collection. I was able to acquire a lot of animals through great partnerships and friendships. And I use those as often as I can to help educate. The foundation does not fund what I do. I use it as the educational, it's different buckets that gets dropped in the educational bucket. The money we raise goes to other organizations, like you said, that are out in the wild doing better, or in captivity, and definitely not just turtles. Turtles are not for everyone. Luckily, they're for us, but we try to really go broad and hit different, as many different species, as many locations, and the locally now and internationally as we could.
Right. That's kind of the multifaceted aspect, is you're doing sort of funding conservation, but you also have sort of an education side, and that's your collection. That's real inspiring to me. I mean, you'll send me, and I follow the Instagram pages, and anyone listening should, and we'll link those. But there's a lot of cool pictures on there with kids that come over and experience the animals, and I think that's one of the most powerful things you can have for is getting young people involved, because for all of us here doing this now, that was the case with us. We can probably all share our individual stories too, even, but it's inspiring to see that when you have a group of young people there hands-on with an animal, there's no better way for them to learn. Those stories behind that are inspiring to me. I'm sure there's some moments you've had there where there's been a large impact. You see a kid interact with an animal and have a really life-changing moment. I'm curious if there's any moments that stand out in your mind, encounters like that.
There are lots of different moments, and when you watch the faces of the kids when they're touching, a baby turtle, or they're holding one, or that's actually a snapping turtle and it's got a cool story. The mother was hit by a car and it was killed, and I've got crazy friends who were able to salvage the eggs and hatch them and send me one to raise. So to just watch their eyes and watch how they evolve through the process of visiting here. And you guys, several of you have been here. It's not really remarkable to me. It's a very small place. It's a vast, I don't know, it's a bunch of different species, but it's done in a way that's manageable. I don't have help. I just do it myself. And we don't have that many people come, not as many as I would like, but life gets in the way, jobs and stuff. The other thing I have done is reached out and have a pretty good rapport with a lot of other keepers. And we've been able to even visit like Ken and Harkin. We took a bunch of kids up there and just walked around. And, it was an interesting experience because a lot of them knew him from YouTube and were able to go to his house and meet him through my friendship with him. Mark McCarthy's another great guy. He's a really good friend. We go there often. He has all sorts of animals, but what he does, in my opinion, really well is the rehabilitation of native animals in need that, people drop them off all the time.
Right. So that's a cool aspect. People can come to your private. It is a private facility, correct?
Yeah, it's not open to the public. It is my, it's my weird turtle dork, area. That if I have time and if you show interest and you want to come, you come. There's no entry fee. There's no money involved in that. If you want to come and learn, that's great. If you want to bring a group of kids, that's great. If we can work it out. No admission. There's no, it's very separate. It's hard to explain to people, but it's just the educational part of what I do, just because that's kind of who I am, versus this wasn't really designed to be an educational facility. Oftentimes people arrive and they're like, oh, I went to Moorcroft Conservation Foundation. Well, the foundation's just kind of a thing that's out there, with the board of directors, and it's a funding machine and an education opportunity. But this place, brick and mortars, is not actually a foundation.
It's definitely one of the cleanest and best maintained collections, even if it's not the biggest that I've ever seen. And I think Michael and Jason would definitely agree with that.
Well, it's something that makes me proud, and in order for anyone to come, I want it to be clean. I want it to be organized. It stays functionally clean. It stays working clean. But you guys know, you clean water. There's someone poops in it. They feed some whatever food. They drag it around. So there's always, I have a colony of house geckos that live in here and kind of poop on things. And I'm fine with them living here. They help control whatever insects might come in. But overall, people actually walk in. It has to look a certain way. I want to be proud of it. But so thank you.
Yeah,
it definitely is. I agree with that. Certainly, having visited a lot of different facilities, your facility is top notch, and it honestly, that it's really clean when you as a person don't feel presentable enough to be there. Last time we came, we had slept in a car at Cracker Barrel in Palm Beach for about 3 hours the night before, and it was a little bit rough, but that's how you know it's a nice facility, because we came in, it's like, all right, we need to leave because we're not clean enough to match this.
That was a rough visit. I was like, oh my God, you guys are not even really, like, I'm saying all the wrong things. You're not interested. You know, your first visit here, I think it was more than a year ago. It was during the winter. I remember being really excited for you to come because I wanted to get your perspective on a private keeper, you know, and what you kind of felt walking through and seeing the different animals kept in an artificial way. You know, I have baby turtles in tubs with water and fake plants, you know, that's so far away from nature. But it's offering them what they need right now, and it's offering them a chance to, you know, get seen by people and talk about, you know, a pretty good collection. So it was interesting to hear your perspective. You couldn't have been nicer.
I mean, I try to be honest. I think that it's an interesting topic because as humans, we have such a monopoly over a lot of different habitats and species, and it becomes a question of what is captive keeping useful, and is it contributing to the long-term persistence of populations of species in the wild? I think for well-meaning people that keep turtles, that's sort of the goal. And it may not be directly contributing, but I think that all the support that the turtles can get is a good thing. And those animals could be in a lot worse hands. And so to give them a life that's optimal is, I think that in itself is something that you should be proud of, and that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. And a lot of that, I would say, comes from relationships with, you know, again, Mark McCarthy, he started on the Egyptians. He does a great job with it.
Yeah, right. And I mean, that's an interesting species in itself. Those ones are really exciting when you see them there. And they've got kind of an interesting history. There are probably some left in the wild, but sort of in effect functionally extinct. And you're working with those. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about what your long-term goals are.
You know, I don't always think of it as short-term or long-term goals. I think of what works. I will say when they were listed with the ESA, it did cause me a little bit of pause because I want to be responsible and breed animals that I know will have a future and be respected and end up in good hands. And by the law changing where they can't leave the state, you know, it changed things a little bit. So I think just breed as many as naturally want to happen. I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to force it or try to grow them fast. If they breed, that's great. If luckily they're really small, as you know, and they're easy to care for. You know, when you understand it, I've had some good luck. So I just keep, you know, if I have a bunch of them, I have a bunch of them. And if I have to give them away to help, then I'll give them away. You know, luckily I have a job that helps fund this. So I'm not relying on this as a source of income. So I guess just as long as I'm able to do it well, I'll keep going with it. And I'd like to say that's one other thing I've learned. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in either trends or pressure from other keepers and people. And I've learned, and sometimes I have to learn, and to keep the animals that I know I can do well with and that actually interest me. And, you know, I'm going to pick on Anthony Pirlione. He'll approach me with different opportunities to get different species, and I'm quick to always say no. You know, like I have plenty. I want to make sure it's manageable. And when I feel overwhelmed and I feel like this is becoming a ball and chain, then I find spots for animals. You know, and one of the things I've been good at, I know I'm jumping topic, is having young animals sent and raised and then send them back. So, you know, in one way, I'm taking a little bit the pressure off some owners and keepers to, you know, get them through the more sensitive periods. But I like raising babies. And once they reach an area where they're outgrowing what I feel is appropriate, then they go back. So it's kind of all over the place. Sorry.
I think, it makes sense. It's good to have someone that The other thing I've noticed when we were there is that you seem to know the personalities of all your turtles really well, and you have kind of an inclination to understand the individuals. Maybe you could speak to that a bit.
There, you know, it's all food driven, really. Not all. A lot of it is comfort. A lot of it is food, like the Spangleri, which are just complete clowns. I'm really careful what I feed them, and I actually don't feed them often. But when I have a group of people come, I'm going to feed them worms. Do they all the time? No. But when people come, I'm going to pull out the worms. It's just part of what's interesting, and it's clearly something they also enjoy. It's not a bad food. So they, or if I start doing too many projects out here, every Spangleri, I think I have 8 of them, 10 actually, all are watching through the glass. Watching every move. So it's a little bit funny when people come and they're not used to it. They're like, there's all these eyes on me. And the Egyptians, they want to eat in the morning. Everyone has kind of a routine. A lot of it is food or habit. Pancakes come out early or late. There's no point feeding some of the animals in the middle of the day. It's a waste. So you just kind of know what works and their different temperaments. So yeah, I mean, they all have different personalities, but a lot of it is them just being reptiles and, either thermoregulating or eating. And I'm not going to say they follow me around like a cat.
Right. Maybe we could jump back really quick to something you said earlier, that this isn't your career, but your career is working with horse training and such, and I don't know about that area as much as you would, but it's interesting to me because there's quite a few people that we've talked to that turtle work is not their primary profession. Curious how that career has shaped your view of conservation and how it supports your ability to do conservation work.
That's a slippery slope. I wear many hats in an average day. As a compassionate human, or I think I identify as that most of the time. The training animals to show and compete really is a question mark. The environmental impact is a question mark for me. So there's that one component to the horse industry that I'm never 100% confident that I'm doing it well enough. With that said, the compassionate humanitarian part of it, when I watch what that does for, it's going to sound sexist, but mostly young girls, the sense of accomplishment and confidence and freedom that they get, and by learning to control an animal and actually go over jumps with an animal and then actually compete against their peers is a real life-changing experience. And so it's definitely a balancing. But with that said, I think that's why the conservation and the foundation part really was so important for me to feel more whole. And as I touched on earlier, I'm not afraid to admit I talked to a sports psychologist, a woman that rode, and said I was involved with different foundations and different governance of our sport, and for a lot of reasons that changed. So we started this foundation, and I was able to, now, I'd like to say one thing. The facility we work out of, which you guys have seen, has a 15-acre pond and a track around it, and has a lot of wildlife. So I try to incorporate that, and everything has to be age appropriate, whether it's different visitors here or different age of students and different abilities. If you have a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, it's a different story than a 12-year-old, for instance. They're not going to care about, different types of birds and species of butterflies and stuff. But depends on your audience. You can incorporate a lot of natural education and natural wildlife, and you can get into, especially in Florida, what's native, what's not native, what's invasive, what's dangerous, what is just something we've all lived with. So again, that's a long, broad answer. But my career and living in South Florida and the advantage of the foundation has opened up a different way of looking at the world, and I try to incorporate more than just riding to my career.
I wanted to touch on something you said earlier about just knowing your individual animals and like having a smaller amount of them. You can actually, it's not like you're collecting Pokemon cards or something. Like it gets really out of hand with some keepers, and it's, I don't know, like you have a smaller amount of animals and really give them everything they need, give them all the attention and get to know them. It's just way more, not only is it's better for them, but it's just more meaningful for you too. Like that's what I think.
I've had that experience, whether it's horses or I raised a bunch of birds before. And when you have too many, it just takes away. You can't, it literally is a ball and chain. And as you said, I want to be able to have it more, closed and intimate where I understand the animals and I can do it well. And there's this, mentality that more is great and have more, own more money, more everything. But really, the more you have, the more stress I'm not as happy when I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it well enough for the animal, and if I'm not happy, I don't know how they can be happy. So moderation is key, and I think that's I was going to say it's a maturity thing, but I think it's just a self-realization thing. When you're in too deep, you just have to take a step back, and it would be very, very easy for all of us to end up with too many animals, too many responsibility, too many things. We're all likable. We all have friends. We all have people that are trying to share with us and give us stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be a little bit strong and say, no, I'm really sorry. Nothing personal. It's just not working. I don't think it's the direction I'm headed right now.
One thing I've highlighted sort of with the idea of the foundation is this idea that there are a lot of people that have come to help build your place, and it requires a team. Maybe you could talk about some of the different people that have sort of contributed to building MCF to what it is today.
Really, it just starts with a small core group of people, a relationship, keepers that have more experience. I went and visited Ralph Tills. Ralph's funny. He wouldn't let me have Egyptians until I went there and met him and looked at his facility, and which is great. I love that. It was a pain in the butt, but I made it work. And different facilities. I went to Palm Beach Zoo. I went to there's this crazy thing, Line Country Safari near me. It's 5 minutes away. I went there. Just different places to make sure I could do it well. The inside, I knew enough to do it kind of my way. Although one funny story, I had a bunch of Geomyda japonica, and I brought in a bunch of debris from outside and some leaves, some sticks, some, just different stumps, and made these really cool enclosures. And about 6 weeks later, I was infested with roaches in that enclosure, which for sure, I brought them in, and although it looked great, it was a mess. So I had to kind of learn, you can do it a little more carefully. But as far as the outside stuff, we did have to have professional people do, the fencing. There's a great guy that does zoo enclosures. Did where the spotted turtles live, which you guys saw. He also did where I have a very small group of domestic cats that live in a catio outside. He did that. But as far as like the ponds and some of the other, one other build inside, I've developed good relationships with like Greg Brashear and Tanner Serpa and Dan, the crazy turtle man. And, I like it when they come in video and, kind of reach a broader audience than I can reach here. It just kind of got me thinking, and I was able to put a week together where Tanner Serpa and Greg Brashear and Dan came down and installed a snapping turtle pond. And they filmed the process, and we had a great time. We went out to the Everglades. We looked for pythons. We traveled around, and we just really enjoyed each other's company and made something which I think is beautiful when people come, or when people come to film, that they can, understand the backstory. So again, long answer, but this adventure has introduced me to so many people, and especially the YouTube stuff. A lot of people know who I am. I go in pet stores now and people ask if I'm Charlie, which is a little weird. And one funny story, I'm fairly well known at the horse shows just because I've been here forever, and I teach a variety of children that are kind of well known. But one father came up to me and said, "Are you Charlie Moorcroft?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure I am. I'm here at the horse show." And he said, "Are you the turtle guy?" And that was like the biggest compliment, that he wasn't asking if I was the dumb horse trainer Charlie, but if I was the turtle guy that he saw on YouTube. So kind of a small world, really.
It's cool that those spread so much. It's a cool thing. The people is something that's kind of a fun aspect of turtle work in general, is getting to know different personalities. When I spent time in Madagascar and Belize, now you get to meet a lot of different personalities all over, and in the United States, of course, but there's such a diverse range of people interested in turtles, and it sort of makes everything a lot more interesting. You get a lot of good personalities and good stories.
Oh, for sure. One of the most influential people, and I can't even tell you why he's that influential, just because, I don't know, he was just an important, amazing human to me, was a really good friend named Fred Grunwald. And he was just an amazing keeper, a really old Florida reptile guy who sadly passed away a few years ago. And he just made you realize, just you be you. Like, do what works for you. Don't care what anyone else says or thinks or does or expects. If you like working with an animal, work with an animal. If you don't. But I met so many amazing people there. And a lot of people, I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of people would go there and film and kind of, use his facility as just a hangout. Like, I would, no matter who you are or what your background was or what differences you had, when you walked down his driveway, you just were a person, and you were equal, and there was no drama, no bullcrap, no anything. So I'll never be able to have that type of place here just because of career and privacy and things. But I miss that sense of community where all different walks of life, just showed up, and everyone was on a level, even playing field, and you just had a common thread.
When you're united by a common interest, a lot of the things that are sort of bad those screens go down, and it unites a lot of different people from different walks of life. It's a cool thing that I've noticed with turtles and just any common interest that people have for the most part.
Yeah, South Florida, I'm not going to lie, we have a bunch of whack jobs down here, and we have a bunch of professional YouTubers, and some legit, some fake stuff, some are all sensationalized. But it's like everyone had immunity when you went there, and you just checked it at the curb and walked up and had respect for the common interest of animals and Fred, and away you went. And that was a good lesson. It was a good life lesson for me to just be able to experience that. And I've maintained a lot of really good friendships and relationships because of meeting people at Fred's, and because of the foundation, and because of the YouTube. And I've gotten some pushback from people about some of the people who have filmed here and things, and really it reaches a broader audience than I could ever do. So I don't see any harm in that.
Right. I once saw Shaq's daughter get sprayed by Mrs. Kipling from Jessie, the monitor lizard. That was kind of something that stood out to me, and kind of a random comment, but it leads into what I'm going to ask. I'm curious, as you've mentioned, there are a lot of really interesting personalities in South Florida, and a lot of them have come to your place. Are there any really interesting or silly stories that come to mind? I know there are, but what are the top ones that we need to hear?
That I'm going to be careful with. I will say Tanner Serpa, who is just, I don't know, he's like in you guys' league. He's so smart, and he's just amazing and creative and confident, and he's an amazing human. But what people don't realize, he's the biggest goofball, total dork, and I don't even care that I'm saying that. And we have so many outtakes and so many bloopers. Like, we were just crying, laughing the whole time. I mean, he's like lying in the garage floor, just laughing and jumping around and dancing and dropping stuff. And when he did a tank for Everglades mud turtles, I mean, the place was trashed in there. Just, grab this, drop. We kept changing the angle of the camera because there was mud on the floor and stuff. It was it was just a great adventure in just being a human and being a goofball and just letting your guard down. And not always what you see is what you get. But there's no real bad stories. There's no drama. I'll say the worst story of Fred's was I happened to at one point do a TV show, and somehow we all went over to Fred's and we filmed an episode for HGTV. It was just a 30-second clip, but Brian Baumler's father decided somehow to lean over this chain link fence and feed the crocodile, and it jumped up and almost got him. And that actually aired, but that was a little bit of a hairy moment when things could have gone a little bit south, but it ended up being okay. But just normal stuff you guys would know. I'm around, speeding around and trespassing to look at different bodies of water for animals. I mean, it's all in a good day's fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. It's always a different experience. At least the 2 times I've been to your place, it's always been cool because there's something different going on. You mentioned the Everglades mud turtles. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about those.
I don't know how much people know, but I like small animals. I think they're easier to manage. I'm not one who wants Galapagos or Aldabras, or definitely not sulcatas. And the mud turtles are pretty common here. There's a group from the Everglades that just get eradicated by crows and cars, and there's some friends that have driven by and seen animals that are moments from being killed by crows, or dead on the road, females trying to just cross and lay eggs that they've taken the eggs from. So there's a small group of animals that are really rescues. I'm not one to say, oh, let's go set traps and pull wild animals and jam them into captivity, but I am willing to kind of look at it through a different lens when a crow is 2 pecks away from taking an animal's life and you're able to save that animal or get eggs. I don't mind that. Another friend was driving around and a crow dropped a tiny hatchling and smashed it into the road. And that one came home and got raised up and released onto private property and stuff. We're not just out pulling animals from the wild and, selling them. So I do have a group of Everglades mud turtles, which are really, really cool. And they're different colors and tiny. And obviously you guys know a captive bred animal is so much calmer. It's all they know is captivity. So they end up eating better, parasites, diseases, all of that are less of a worry. And I don't want to be the guy that has wild caught animals here. So I do have a small group. I have some eggs hatching. I have a little hatchling, which is tiny. And Tanner came and tried to replicate, really the Everglades. I bought on Etsy some cypress knees, and we went and got some Florida limestone and studied different native plants, or local plants. I'd say some aren't native or some are native now but weren't. But we made what was really like an Everglades habitat for one, which is, first thing you see when you walk in my garage.
It's a cool habitat. Yeah, it's the whole cypress knee that was added in there. It's real well done. I mean, it makes sense, but it was cool to see that. This probably leads into the next thing. I'm curious your perspective on this. What do you think the best pet turtle is?
Depends. I think tortoises are easier than turtles. I don't honestly think they make great pets. They're not. It depends what your goal is. If you want to have something in a really cool enclosure that's naturalistic and like a terrarium type, then I would say something like a Spengler I would be an amazing pet. If you want something big and kind of clumsy and that you're able to care for, maybe a bigger tortoise. I think tiny little stink pot mud turtles make great pets because you can house them appropriately indoors, and they're eat different variety of foods and stuff. So it all depends what your goal is, but they're not. These are reptiles. They're not warm and fuzzy. You guys obviously know that, and I don't pretend that they're anything other than they are. I mean, these are reptiles, and yeah, the cherry heads especially are my pets, but I expect them to be cherry heads. I don't expect them to be anything more. So really, captive, small, and something that it might outlive you. So in my case, I have a will, and these animals are in it, and I'm always careful what I add because it has to make sense long term, short term, and long term.
Yeah, I feel like large aquatic turtles are some of the worst like pet species somebody could take. Like someone comes home with a big soft or even a slider is just way more than what an average little kid is going to be able to keep or deal with in a tank or a tub.
Yeah, no, it's I love painted turtles. I think they're awesome. Southern painted turtles are beautiful to me. They're not as beautiful as some of the others, but I like them. I would encourage people to have that. If the question is, spend a little bit more money, and you guys all know this, spend a little bit more money now going in, or get a yellow belly or red-eared, which is cheaper, but in the long, you can get a Florida softshell here for $20, which I would never do. Invest now in something that's going to last longer. Otherwise, you're just disappointed. And also, if you pay a little bit more, you're probably going to take better care of it. When something costs nothing, it might not have a value to you. And when it outgrows your area or your interest or your kid's interest, it doesn't have a value. You just are quick to, in our case in South Florida, just throw it in a canal or a pond. And that happens. I know we're going sideways here, but that happens with tortoises. I have a rescued cherry head that I'm pretty sure was just put in a canal, and they're like, "Oh, it's a turtle. Like, see you later. Go swim on." So it's all stems back to education. Study, know what's going to work for you long term, know what's interesting. Some animals, box turtles, eat a variety of foods. Herman's is going to eat a lot less options. That depends what your goal is, really.
Yeah, when you really look at the biology of certain species like sliders and larger river turtles, like Jack was saying, some of those species will move over a mile at times, and they frequently need, home range is going to be on the range of hundreds of meters. They need a lot of space. If you can provide that, they're rewarding, but if not, it's sort of go with something else.
I think what you said about box turtles are some of the best. I would recommend box turtles just from my own experience. I don't have as much turtle keeping experience as you, but just how rewarding and easy the eastern box turtles are to keep up north. It's like I would recommend that over almost anything. I have sulcatas and they're like livestock. They destroy the yard. They have these massive burrows. Like they're not. I wouldn't recommend them to anybody.
Yeah, I try not to be judgy, but I know I wouldn't raise sulcatas. I wouldn't hatch them. I wouldn't breed them, but that's just me, and I'm going to do me. You guys do you. Box turtles, I would recommend Chinese box turtles. They're beautiful. They're not maybe as individual looking as some of the American box turtles, but they're awesome, and they can probably live outside in most areas. I know people in New York have them outside. Anthony has them outside. They're really cool. They're personable. They follow you around. Those guys are amazing. So I would, and they're, they kind of check the conservation box also. This guy was biting my toes. I'm in flip-flops living in Florida. So this guy, one of the male cherry heads, this is Dale.
Dale?
So he's going to go back. He's going to go back to the ladies and not my foot, I hope.
When you talk about keeping things, there's a lot of controversy around some of the newer regulations and how it's monitored. Is there anything that you'd like to see changed in terms of regulations?
I just don't, I live my life maybe a little bit on the challenging side, but there's what's right and there's what's wrong. and then there's what's legal and what's illegal. And those oftentimes are not the same. And I think they should be. And I think a lot of the laws were intended to, be that. But, like the Florida box turtle law, I can legally go and take poach, I'm going to use that word, from the wild and keep them as pets, 2 per household member. But if I have someone who rescued one, I have a bunch that have been through my hands that were captive bred. So if those were able to be raised and breed, I can't sell those babies. So I think there's rules that work and rules that don't work. I never really question, I'm not allowed to touch a gopher tortoise and help it cross the road. I'm supposed to just watch it get hit by traffic. Yet if I'm a developer, I can pay what's a hefty fine to basically, just bury the burrows. So it's either right or it's wrong. And I'm not sure a hefty fine, although that might work for the town or the government, the animal isn't benefiting from that money. So again, there's a bunch, green iguanas. It'll be cool if I see one. It's not quite warm enough yet. But there's probably at one time 50 green iguanas in my yard, and they're illegal. I can't touch them. I can't do anything. There was a point when you could catch them or keep them and get rid of them, and I think there were less in the wild. And then when they make something illegal, a lot of people, not maybe me or us, but a lot of people just open the cages and set them free. Like, wow, you're now illegal, tegus and stuff. So I think that has a worse environmental impact when something is illegal, and people just don't do the responsible thing. We all know the whole snake story with Florida back a couple months ago. That was just because the laws are all changing. And I'm not saying the average reptile keeper in Florida that does it for a job is an upstanding citizen. And I also think, I talked to Anthony and Ralph Till, Daytona reptile show is coming up next week. And I know Eric Good is speaking. I know that's controversial. And I know when people start commenting on that, it just reminds the world that not just Florida laws, but reptile keepers in Florida, we're not very united, and we're not very, we don't look very smart as a group. So I'm not sure how, I'm going somewhere with this, don't worry. I'm not sure as a group in Florida how we really influence the government or FWC and get things changed when we just seem like, crybabies that are worried about our finances.
Yeah.
Not what you expected, sorry, but that's my 2 cents.
It does seem like, just in general, something it seems like it's fairly consistent in a lot of different areas in life is that cost-benefit analysis on a lot of regulations. Well, in sort of the area of law, it's definitely lacking. There's a lot of it seems like it's just sort of push and pull. Different camps really get deeply ingrained in a viewpoint and run with that. But I think just in general, if you had a more time to research, that's probably the research analytical side of me speaking. It's probably not it doesn't make sense to do that. It'd be impossible to test everything empirically. But I feel like some of these regulations have good intention, but there isn't enough that goes into figuring out the costs associated with them.
Yeah, I think it's and that's such a big can of worms. We could get into whole politics and DC and lobbyists and PETA and the Humane Society and Greenpeace, all of that. It's unfortunate that we can't really control their hidden agendas and their money and their marketing, how they set commercials out about you're watching seals getting clubbed with clubs, and what that money really goes towards. It's really, we're up against, I like USARK because I think they're smart and I think they give us a voice, and I think they actually do their homework and understand what's really happening. But we're up against a lot of money and a lot of emotions from the average human, And I think that it's an uphill battle. I worry long term. I've thought about leaving Florida. I worry long term about what animals I can keep here. I don't want the government telling me what I can and can't do, because I do it in a way that I'm, I can sleep at night. I'm proud of. I'm not doing anything wrong. But I wish I didn't have to have permits, and I wish the people issuing the permits and the people, involved actually had more experience. I think Greg, we can pick on him. I think Greg will tell you when he's out in the field or dealing with some people in the government, he's oftentimes educating them as to what's happening. So I don't know. That's a can of worms, and I wish I had the answer, but don't really know. I'm just walking around outside. Hopefully that's all right.
I think the uphill battle is kind of the story of turtle conservation, like every aspect of it, like on all fronts. It's like you're facing these threats that and more powerful. Like there's the political things. There's just the straight up desire and for turtles overseas and all of that. It's just like, how the hell are we supposed to beat any of this? Like, realistically.
Yeah. And it, you can be defeated by it, or you can say, look, here's the level at which I can make a difference. And, that's where I try to focus. I try and keep, my areas clean. I try to encourage as many people like you guys. I really enjoyed having you guys over and kind of showing you the town and having conversation. That's, I can give back and involve people and get some crazy YouTubers here to get the story out. It's, you can only do what you can do. And I don't get defeated by it. I'm aware of it. And I think it's pretty dark, but just try and, keep my head up and keep going and do it as well as I can and work with animals that I know, I can make a difference with and do well by. I don't want to work with animals that it's a struggle, or I'm questioning whether they're happy or whether I'm able to do it. I had these crazy albino snapping turtles, and that was a bit of a drag. And it really was interesting to people when they came that there was a snapping turtle and it was albino. But at the end of the day, it wasn't working and the animals weren't happy. So I made the choice to, send them to someone else who could do it better than me. And, that's an ego thing too. You just have to say, wow, it's not working. It's okay. Nothing personal. And you're not letting anyone down. You're just doing what's right for everyone, especially the animal. The animals have to come first to a degree. I'm not going to say, oh, I'll just let everything loose because they're going to come first. That's not responsible either. But you guys, know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that captive breeding of turtles and tortoises takes pressures off of wild populations? I don't know if really anyone has the answer to this question. It seems kind of case specific, but I'm curious what you think.
I would use spotted turtles as that example. Are people going to always be stealing spotted turtles? Yeah, sadly, I was up in Connecticut a few weeks ago and spent the day with Anthony, and we went to this one old bog that had spotted turtles, and you could see areas where people were dragging nets out, dip netting, and and I know there's rumors that animals have been poached out of that area. But with that said, I was able to send 25 spotted turtles out this year that were hatched here and raised here. So I think that's making a difference. If 25 can go on to, be in the pet trade or in keepers' hands, hopefully that's less that are going to be taken from the wild. And I don't even care if they're free. It's not about the money. It's about breeding them in a way that I know they're healthy. I know they're happy. There's, just getting them out there for the public. So I think that does make a difference.
Right. If you've got effective conservation too, it gets complicated, I think, at a global scale, like the stuff that we were dealing with in Madagascar. And when you're trying to protect species where there isn't really a legal system there, if you've got protection like you have in the United States for a species and captive breeding, I think that those two things work hand in hand if the enforcement's there. But So yeah, I think that that's a good example where obviously you can't fix the whole problem, but there is probably some level of swamping effect of getting more turtles out there that are sourced responsibly.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the best example. You know, I have radiateds. I like them. I was always cautious to get them because of their size, and they're a little bit of a challenge to breed, and they grow slowly. And I just wanted to be responsible. But I think they're part of a good story, and they're beautiful, and it's another interesting type of animal to share with people. But having them here isn't going to change anything in Madagascar. But locally, I think as you said, if I can breed some southern painted turtles, they're relatively inexpensive, and they'll be captive bred and they'll be healthy, and I'll just give them to friends or give them to people. Hopefully, people aren't out there taking them from the wild, which there's no financial incentive. If we can produce enough in captivity in the pet trade, then people shouldn't be needing to go, poach animals from the wild. So that's one small difference, I think, but not globally.
Right, that's well said. I think it's a good conservation philosophy, and it's tough. I mean, no one can make all the difference, so we have to have a lot of different people in different areas. But so you're in South Florida, and we've touched on this a little bit, but you've also done some trips to other facilities and even into the Everglades region. Curious what your experience and maybe how that influences how you keep things.
I guess efficiency and flow and space. I look at some species and think, wow, they require more space than I'm able to give, or wow, they are in a smaller area or more horizontal or more vertical. Different substrates like the Egyptian tortoises. My friends in Europe don't really like the whole crushed oyster shell, chicken grit thing. And in our country, we really like that. Some people think, okay, well, let's go with more humid, more bark, more mulch for young ones. And as they reach maturity, then you can go to a drier area, which I've kind of adopted a lot of it. But you learn something from everything. I learn in South Florida what really can live here that doesn't belong here, from crazy boo-foo toads, which I don't like, to Cuban tree frogs, which are everywhere. I've learned a lot about what's invasive in Florida, but a lot of, there's this old stupid saying that horses already left the barn. You can make green iguanas illegal. It's not going to change anything. They're gone. You can plecostomus are in every canal I go in, and so are snakeheads. So when people go fishing and they take, okay, well, I'm going to take the snakeheads out and the plecostomus out. It's a drop in the bucket. It's not really changing anything. So I learn a lot about that. I like talking to old-time Florida people, Floridians, Florida people who, grew up here. I've watched it change. Since I've been in this town, there are roads that used to be barbed wire, cattle, and lots of really lush green little scrub forests are now box stores and restaurants and paved, 6-lane roads. So I know, Florida's becoming crazy and everything is getting pushed out. So I don't know. I guess Florida's one area. I haven't really learned how to take better care of the animals from living here, but I've just watched what the impact of man on native and non-native species, and sometimes the non-native thrive really with the more influence, and the more we do to the environment. Sometimes the non-natives have a better area. But as far as traveling to other stuff, I love traveling. I went to the TTPG where I first met you, and went to see Andrew's place, and I got a lot of really great ideas. I'm always like studying and kind of taking mental notes how to look at things from a different lens. And one thing I try and challenge myself, whether it's at the horse barn where I work or here, I try and walk through like I've never been. Like, what's the first instinct? Like, if I've never been here and I come in, what's the first thing I see? What works well? What needs to be tweaked or changed? And it's always a process. This place is ever changing. I talked to Anthony years ago about, when you have an art gallery, you have a different showing all the time. You have different animals or different art coming and going, and I wanted to do a little bit of that. And our compromise was getting different young animals that we raise through the winter when it's busy here, and then sending them on their way. So we try and change it up to keep it interesting. But everywhere you go, you take away something, even if it's the fact that you're doing it well the way you have it, or I want to change something, or thank God I don't want to do it that way. So I don't know if that helps, but that's you're affected positively, neutral, or negatively by every experience.
You mentioned the non-native species. I'm curious what kind of effects you see there, because you're pretty much in the capital for that.
I'm not smart enough to know the true effects. I'm not going to tell you that I know pythons are decimating different things out here. I know the bufu toads are everywhere. I know they're killing dogs. They're eating native animals. I know the feral cats too everywhere are a problem, but they're actually feeding the coyotes. The coyotes are making a comeback, and people are freaking out about the coyotes, but the coyotes are killing a lot of feral cats. So it's just a weird dynamic. There's a bunch of feral parrots everywhere, Quaker parakeets, which live in the power lines. They fly over our yards, I'd say several times a day, different colonies in Miami. There's huge populations. I've been to my friend Mike Loret's facility, and they have this huge stand where they feed the wild macaws in Miami, and they come out, feral macaws. They're wild now, but so some of it isn't causing damage. I don't really think the green iguanas are causing as much damage as people think. They're worried about burrowing. I guess they burrowed under a bridge and they caused some question mark about road safety. I think they're eating a lot of things that I grow. They eat the hibiscus, they eat the mulberry. If I put out a lot of greens for the redfoots, I know I'm feeding the iguanas. It just goes hand in hand. The iguanas actually like Missouri, believe it or not. They would like that all the time. So I kind of guard when I feed, I guard what I'm feeding to keep the non-native stuff out. So I see it firsthand. But again, I don't think it's not so dangerous other than the bufu toads and the Cuban tree frogs. They also have the Cuban anoles, the brown ones, which are out competing the native green anoles, which I don't know if you guys saw that. But yeah. I also have, I think I told you, in my garage, I have a colony of house geckos, which just run all over the place at night. I'll go out there and they're just on top of the glass. They're, I'd say there's probably 20 that live in the garage. Am I going to do anything about it? No. They're just there. So some you learn to live with, some you worry about.
It's interesting. A lot of I've researched this a bit, and you look at through papers, and people are doing all these simulations to figure out the potential impacts. But talking to people like you that are living in the epicenter of that issue gets you more information in a lot of ways than you'd get from some computer simulation. So it's interesting to hear perspective.
Yeah, and again, I can only speak on my personal experience, but I know friends farther south. Florida is a long state, and my friends in Jacksonville keep animals very differently than people in Miami. There's a lot of different weather, a lot of different growing climates here. So as you go closer to Miami or south of Miami, and you kind of branch out towards the Everglades, that's really the Wild West down here. And the Everglades does actually come up the middle of the state and actually touch our town of Wellington, where you guys went. It's the very tip of it, but it's actually Everglades, and it's basically a highway for pythons and alligators and animals that enjoy that environment. So they have unlimited place to explore and expand.
South Florida is like a totally different animal than when I'm now living in Gainesville, and there's nowhere near as many invasive species, plants, reptiles, animals like things like that. But I mean, you hardly even see plecos or anything in the rivers up here. I think I've seen one in the Santa Fe River the entire time I've been here. But that when I visited you down there, it's like most of what you saw was non-native creatures just all over the place. It was pretty rough.
Just the system of canals and we built, I say we, they, whoever, I'm not a builder. people dug and excavated canals to get fill, and they took the fill and they built house pads. So it made a better system for the water, and it gave you material to build up where your house would be put for flooding. I mean, we live in, we live in the Everglades. We live in we're in the middle of a swamp, frankly. So the canals are a great system for snakeheads, all these crazy cichlids, tilapia, and it's a real highway for them to go anywhere they want, and the pythons also. So, and plus we have Egyptian geese, which I think are really cool. I don't really think they're doing anything wrong. We have black-breasted whistling ducks, all sorts of different birds, which kind of coexist with our native animals and migratory animals. But really, South Florida, as you say, it's easy to get around if you're a wild animal here, other than major 6-lane roads.
Right. Sort of changing the focus a bit. Curious what kind of advice you would give to people looking to provide the most natural habitats for turtles in captivity. What are some of the things that have worked for you?
I guess just studying what temperatures really is a huge thing, and humidity, slope, and depth of substrate, and sparsity, whether you're desert, whether you're forest, whether you're tropical, how much light. Really just doing your homework, and then it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be within reason. And again, a lot of these captive animals, they never saw the wild, so you're giving them your version of what you think works, and I think there's a lot of playroom there to not get it exactly right, but I think it's up to us to do it in a way that the animal is happy and that we're responsible and proud of what we're doing. So a lot of it is just research. Hopefully you're getting animals from people that do it well, that you like and respect, and are part of an organization. I'm not really a big fan of classified ads. I'd rather network and work with people. The old turtle forum and the tortoise forum were great tools to learn so much, and everything you wrote was documented. And there were, you had like a screen name or a weird name and stuff, but you still knew who you could trust, and you could really research and ask questions and get help. And Facebook came along and changed that. Now Instagram changed that. Now there's, TikTok and all that. So it's really hard to get back to some really good information, the meat of it. But I would go back and research the turtle and tortoise forums and join groups and ask really good questions. And it has to be realistic. You can't say I'm going to buy a goldfish and not feed it, and it's not going to outgrow the bowl. It has to make sense in the end, or the animal suffers and you're miserable, and then you're just dumping it.
Right. You also when we were there last time, you showed us the aquaponics setup you had. Curious how that factors into how you keep things.
I just like to look at different things and give examples, and I like challenges. And I don't eat fish, but the aquaponic system is a great way to raise tilapia or catfish or different animals. People do it with shellfish or crustaceans. I think it's a cool way in the wintertime. In the summertime here, we struggle with growing. I say everything grows. Tropical things grow year-round, and they actually slow down in the winter. Our northern vegetables, like vegetable crops and food crops that we think of are more traditional northern European stuff, struggles in the summer here. It's just no relief from the heat. So in the winter time, starting October, November, when it cools down, and then in through the winter, I'm able to really grow lettuces, herbs, different things to feed some of the animals through the use of fish waste. So it's kind of a good system. Plus, I have a snail farm. You've seen it all. There's a snail farm. There's an isopod farm. I have a worm farm. So a lot of it is growing the animals to, kind of recycle and reuse. But the aquaponics is cool. It's definitely something most people have not seen or heard of.
Also noticed when we were there that it seems like with your outdoor setups, it's very diverse. With some of the indoor setups, you keep things fairly simple, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it just minimizes the issues that you can have. But maybe you could speak to that just a bit.
Yeah, I'll pick on Tanner. Tanner, who again is a really good friend, and we actually have no filters often, like you guys are with me, without being on the podcast. So Tanner basically looked in the Spangler eye enclosure and nicely told me that it looked like dog crap, and jokingly, but really, it is not, as you said, high tech. It's not ultra fancy. There's different areas, like the outside cherry heads. I have hides from the sun, and they're facing different directions. They're facing all different directions. Some are tighter, which sometimes they all huddle up and go in. Some are bigger and wider. Some are longer. But everything has options. And inside, same thing. The Egyptian tortoises, the females live in a colony. They have a lot of options. There's 6 of them there. There's 4 different big hides. Oftentimes they go together. Sometimes they spread out. So I want them to have options. But do I want to make it so complicated? I had some pancake tortoises years ago, and I made it so incredibly complicated that they were climbing out and getting loose and flipping upside down. And, I gave them basically a jungle gym in there. And then to go find one, I had to dismantle the whole thing. And then getting back to the Spangler eye and the Japonica, I made it so complicated and intense that I was infested with roaches. So it has to, there's a fine line between what's functional and what's clean. It doesn't need to be ultra fancy and creative, but I like it to look natural. I like it to be, diverse and have bioactive, things growing in it. But simple is, there's nothing wrong with simple, but it's not sparse. They're not living in an empty tote.
What kind of substrates do you like to use? That one's a big topic.
The Egyptians, the primary substrate is that oyster grit, but I put reptibark and different cocoa fiber mixed in it. Down here, cypress mulch is a huge thing. I rely on that, but it's pretty chunky. It holds moisture really well, and it breaks down really slowly. So the cherry heads that live inside and grow up are in a mix of reptibark and cypress. And I keep it really, really deep, and I keep the bottom pretty wet. And the top dries out, so they can burrow down and kind of reach humidity. One other thing, which is not substrate, but it's related. I was up at a guy named John Heidegger's place a couple of months ago, and he had like fake asparagus fern plants in, and he misted that plant, the fake plant. And that there was so much mass to the fake plant that it kept moisture all day. So there was like a microclimate under it. And then he kept also deep substrate, which holds moisture. The top can dry out, so you're not dealing with crud and rot. But the animal can kind of burrow down and make a scrape and get to the humidity. The Spangler eye, it's a lot of soil and some bark and a little bit of mulch on top. And living in that are earthworms and isopods. So I just throw in a bunch of them, and they just kind of all coexist. I did have some problems. When I first got Egyptian tortoises from Ralph Till, I had a big galvanized tub, and I put about 4 inches of peat moss that I got from a big box store. And then on top, and I wet that. And then on top of that, I put about 3 or 4 inches of the coarse chicken grit, the oyster shell. People call it coral, but it's really oyster shell. And in the peat moss was, I don't know how or why, but there were so many ticks. I mean, you've been here, there's no ticks in my garage. But for some reason, these ticks came up through the peat moss. And when I studied it and Googled ticks and peat moss, it said they're, in there. I lost an animal. It had 600 ticks on it. And I thought it was just hiding. I didn't bother. And the animals, I don't bother every day. I don't pull them all out, hold them, look at them, examine them. I'm out there regularly enough that I know if there's a situation, or so I thought. But in that case, it was a young, tortoise. They hide a lot. I was working a lot. And finally, when I went and said, I haven't really seen one in a while, and I dug it out, and there were ticks all over it. So just something to be aware of that, you try and do it right, and you make mistakes. So substrate, different options, but it has to be easy to get and something that's kind of proven. And you can mix it up. I also use sphagnum moss. when the cherry heads are first born, and I soak that in water and put that so that they can really burrow in easily. And I put that under one hide and then keep one hide without it. So again, it's all about options and letting them kind of just naturally find what they want. So that's more important than how it looks. It has to be functional, and then I can decorate it best I can on top of being functional.
Right. Yeah. Your dedication to the sort of all different aspects of keeping is admirable, and I think it's a lot of people can learn from what you have to say and your experience, because you think about it in a lot of different sort of different angles. So I think that's kind of what I'm taking from this is if you're keeping turtles and tortoises, you want to think about things from a lot of different angles and how well you're replicating the natural habitat, but also how realistic it is for the safety of the animal. But yeah, so we can start to wrap things up, and I think one of the last things that's not related to turtles 100%, but MCF does work with more than just turtle groups. I was looking at this yesterday. There's some cool stuff that you're doing with horses and other species. Maybe you could talk a bit about some of the non-turtle related work that you support.
Really, I try just to look at what's interesting to me to start, and then what's interesting to other people. Not everyone is as passionate about turtles and tortoises as we are. So when I go to talk about fundraising, I want people to realize it's a broader reach, and again, locally, which is so easy because I have relationships with so many people here, nationally and then even internationally. But again, like lions and tigers and bears and elephants, the big, huge, popular animals get so much awareness and so much funding. And there's so many other animals that don't. And I like birds of prey. I think they're very interesting. Wolves, I think, are great. There's studies that when you release wolves into different natural areas, how that trickles down, and over a certain amount of years, the whole geography changes and is healthier for all. So there's people. I'm never going to have a wolf sanctuary or a wolf, conservation. So there's a way to kind of look at it and make it as diverse as possible. I love salamanders. I love amphibians. We supported them. We support people in South America. There's the Jeffries cats, the Feline Conservation Federation. Just all different. If it interests me and there's a way to give to a smaller group that's maybe doing better, nobody wants to give money to us and then see it go to like the Sierra Club or whatever that is, where you look at their financials and there's millions and millions already sitting in their account. So we try and do some homework, and I love recommendations. I love people reaching out and saying, here's what I'm thinking. Would you consider looking into this topic? So we really word of mouth, and we want to make it as broad as we can so that when we do go fundraising, again, it's there's something interesting for everyone. Last thing I will say is this winter, back to education, which goes to a little bit of fundraising, because I live a mile from the really international equestrian competition, World Equestrian or Winter Equestrian Festival. We have access to so many people from all over the world, and it's really popular. And I have different friends that have taken animals to the horse show with me, whether it's snakes and alligator. We took a Galapagos tortoise. I took one of my skunks, a couple of cherry heads, just because they're really cool looking. And we would just go and visit the horse show for a couple of hours and kind of listen to the animals. Like when the skunk was done, the skunk went home. And we try to do it well. And there's been some different evening, events and celebrations that we've gone to with different groups of animals. But I pull in friends. I don't have an alligator, for instance. I don't have all the cool, sexy stuff that the kids are going to want to hold and touch. But one friend, Birds and Exotics of the World, does a great job. He's done birthday parties. I've introduced him to a ton of people. They'll bring different birds of prey, an alligator. He has an alligator snapping turtle, all permitted, all legal, all on the up and up. and it's a great way for people to get up close and personal, and not have to get in the car and drive to my house or drive to McCarthy's. So it's a way, and that translates to fundraising also. I'm terrible at asking for money for me and for this. If I'm asking for money for something else, I'm pretty good at it. But when people come here and they're like, "Oh, can I make a donation to you?" I would say, "Really, no, I don't. We're not looking for donations for this. We're looking to fund the foundation, which then funds, huge, amazing things." I think I even tried to fund a couple of guys going to the TSA conference. So, it's one way to give back. And, we try and give to 501c3s. There's a guy, Jordan Giannini, who's doing a conference in South Florida. We're trying to support that and all sorts of different things. We've given to the Turtle Room. So really, I'd like to get to the point where we have opportunities for schools and classrooms to have endangered animals. Reeves turtles, for instance, they're plenty in captivity. It's still an endangered animal. They could have that in their classroom. No one's going to say, "Oh, let's go take something from the wild and jam it in the classroom." That's not what we're talking about. But there's a way to have, kids through the safety and structure of a classroom or a teacher responsible for the animals and get, hands-on experience. So that's something we're looking at down the road.
Nice.
Right. I was looking at one of the ones that stuck out to me was this Equus Survival Trust, conserving a lot of horse diversity. It seems like a lot of horses are in sort of bad places genetically and population wise. It's kind of interesting. That was another one that you're supporting that stuck out to me.
Either wild horses. There's the Cloud Foundation, which deals with Bureau of Land Management horses. And also different organizations that are really trying to preserve the different breeds of horses that have been part of our heritage forever. That hits home for a lot of people in my industry.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Well, I think we can start to wrap up, though. We've got like one last thing that we like to ask it, unless anyone else has anything we want to bring up.
Have I bored you all sufficiently?
Oh no, I'm here. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been good. Okay, I guess so. The last thing that's sort of interesting to us is for someone that's looking to make turtle conservation part of a career, what kind of advice would you give?
I don't know if I have any solid advice. I would actually defer to you guys for that. There's work in the field, which I literally know nothing about. I haven't had the privilege of being out there doing as much as you guys and Greg and so many other amazing people have. I'm envious of that opportunity, and maybe in my next lifetime I'll be able to. But right now I don't really have anything on that. And really, this didn't start out as a conservation, thing. It started out just as a collection, which kind of naturally headed that direction. But again, this is not a moneymaker. This is not my job. Oftentimes people see the animals as value. I struggle with that. I mean, for sure, there's some value there, which we're all aware of. You can't not be, but that's not the motivating factor. So I think getting involved and, TSA, Turtle Conservancy, getting involved wherever you are, whatever location, even locally, volunteering and realizing it's not a, it's not a money-making endeavor, in my opinion.
Right. That's good advice. We'll take that to heart. All right. So at the end too, we like to do a little trivia.
I'm out. I suck at that. Okay.
Well,
sorry.
All right.
You can edit that out.
Well, that works. All right. Well, we can. We'll ask you some questions anyway. No, I'm kidding.
No, I don't care. Try it. If I'm excellent at making an ass out of myself. So if you give me an opportunity, I'll take it.
Well, we don't need to do this. I mean, maybe you could ask us. We could make this a little different this time. If you've got non-turtle related questions about other groups of animals that you work with, This could be interesting. I don't know how well we'll do.
No, go with your way. I'm just trying to be funny. It was an epic fail, but that was, it was an effort. Do it your way.
All right. Someone have a question?
All right.
Jason's got a question, I think.
Jason, I've never even spoken with you when you've been here.
He's a real talker.
Yeah, he's pretty communicative now.
I mean,
Proof of life.
all right. I mean, if Jason, I'll go. What year was the alligator snapping turtle split into 3 species?
Oh my
There you
God.
go.
Pass. Recently.
Just
I know
recently.
Greg talked about that. Recently.
First time.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. 2014 was the year.
9 years. See?
Yeah.
2014. Yep.
Yeah.
You're right.
I just had something in my head. That's just.
All right, Jason, what do you have?
Nothing coming out. Is your audio working?
I was wondering why I didn't hear his cat for like the
Well,
entirety.
Shirley,
of
you try to stump us with something, then.
Yeah.
No. I can't. No. I can't be put on the spot. You know.
You
All
own so many like unique animals that you have to have something.
Patagonian Mara.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the what largest rodent?
Oh,
Second, fifth, third, seventh. You pick.
There we go. Multiple choice. Good.
I would say the third largest rodent.
One for Wyatt.
what's between them and the capybara?
Well,
Beavers.
that's controversial. Either the porcupine or some people say the beaver.
Oh yeah, I've seen some huge ass beavers too. Like
Yeah, I think
So,
beaver.
I would think
Yeah, they
they
say
could be.
it's a capybara and then porcupine then, but I think beaver's in there. So
Yeah,
I mean, porcupines can get big, but beavers get absolutely massive.
porcupine's kind of, it's hard to know what's really happening under all the quills.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, Ken, do you have a question? I guess silence means no. I've got a question.
All right.
According to the most recent checklist of turtles, how many species of turtle are there? I actually
That's
don't.
good.
I have a range of plus or minus 2. I think I know what the.
I'm going to call Lifeline. I'm going to call Wyatt and ask him to help me with this one.
No, you're on your own, man. This is your question.
Jason, here's your chance.
I'm trying to figure out my question.
Ken, anybody? I need help.
I mean, I have a guess. I would say 358, but I'm not sure how close. If we're going off the 2021 checklist, I might be off by a little bit there. So
All right. Here's what we can do. I'm going to go next. 347. Let's all go and see who's closest.
I want to say.
I'm sticking with 358.
Yeah, I was gonna say 350.
Ken? Non-participating member? All right.
He's just a little shy today.
Guy. Jason, just say a number. Hold up fingers.
Your audio's not working. That's the problem.
351.
I could actually tell.
What number
Okay.
is that? I'm trying to figure it out.
I think he said 351.
351. All right, we'll go with that. It's probably not. Well, I got to actually check because we're so close now. I think it was 358, but it may be 356. I think Jack got it right.
Okay.
Probably. I mean, I would yield to Jack's opinion on that. All right, Wyatt, what's your question?
I don't complete. All right, it's a good one, but it's kind of hard because I don't know the answer specifically. But I know you keep sliders, and you have some pretty interesting Morphs. So, how many species in the genus Trachemes are native to North America?
That's a good one.
How do you define North America, though?
I only
From Canada to Panama.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
6.
No. Wrong.
More than that?
Is that the only guess? Anybody else want to try?
Yeah.
Oh, you're asking everybody.
Oh yeah. This goes to everybody.
No, it's more than that. If you go down to Panama, geez.
Yeah, because that Panama is the southmost tip of North America,
Let me go this. Okay.
Is it real? All right.
and the Caribbeans are included here.
I've got a guesstimate.
Yeah, go ahead.
15 to 16.
Yeah, it's about what I'll go with, something like that.
Yep, it is 15 species.
My answer was a little light.
You're good.
All right. Well, I think that's good. We got some trivia in. But this was a fun one. Thanks for coming on, Charlie. It's been great to hear about your work, and you're doing a lot of really cool stuff with educating people. And I think all of us it's cool to see, because we're just kind of realize this now, but we're starting to get a little bit older, where it's like there isn't another generation of people coming around. So it's you're doing the work to inspire that group. So it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, we love the work you do. It's great.
Thanks. The one thing
Yep.
to say is it's our job to replace ourselves in whatever
Yep.
capacity that means.
That's a good quote.
Then that's our one thing we should always have in the back of our mind.
There you go.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. I hope I didn't talk too much, or hope I added something. I was worried about not being able to add something really useful, but hopefully there's something there you can pick from.
No, that was
No,
good.
it was good. Yeah, I like that.
Cool.
All right. We'll see
All right.
everyone on the next one.
See ya.